Okay, we want to show you a presentation that Mike Perloff did that is really list up all the stuff that's coming up. We have a number of great events. We have the flagging of the JCC for 9/11 coming up. We have the building of the Sukkah that's also coming up. So we want to make sure that you guys kind of write it down and show up.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. Now I'm going to run through this quickly. Very quickly, if I can see it.
Did you memorize it? Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Right. We're quite busy. I can't believe this crowd, by the way. This is just for the next few months. The first thing is, just about a week and a half from now, we're putting the flags down for 9/11. Raise your hand if you remember seeing this or participated last year. It was extremely well received. Okay, let me go on. Just show up. We're not passing anything around, just show up. This is some of our guys putting flags down. We even had participation from the state police and also Cherry Hill. And this is what it looked like, completely around all the territory. Amazing. Extremely well received. People stopped their cars, they asked about it, and then thanked us for doing it. And then we also had people show up that hadn't anything to do with it earlier to help take things down. I'm moving on. How many people think you might want to participate in this? Raise your hand, please. Remember, all the help that will be well received. That is September 7th. Okay. 10 o'clock. It was on there. Now, we're having an open house. The JCC's having an open house, and we have a table, and we need people to help with that. The next thing is construction of the sukkah. Look at the date. This is the guys doing it. As you can see, it's us. The average age here is probably 75 to 80, so you can help, yes.
September 7th is a Thursday. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Here's some pictures.
Looks like you got plenty of help. You notice the stand.
And this is with the little kids in the sukkah that we put up. And then we take it down. Boy, it was cold that time. Look at that. All right, so that's another activity. Then we have the law breakfast. We had a date set for the law breakfast. Let me show you what it is. Let's go through it first, okay? We need people helping in the kitchen. The 50-50. That's quite a crowd. You're very safe. 3/4 of the people have weapons on.
Where's that at?
I'll tell you in a moment. And here you can see with the honor guard and several of our members. Now, I don't know how to pause this, so I'm going to have to go back and forth. Now, the breakfast. We had a date. When I called the person who is going to be our speaker, who is Mitch Sklar, he's the executive director of the New Jersey Association of Police Chiefs, he said, oh, I'll be glad to speak. However, he says, you got a problem with the date. There's going to be at least 100 or more chiefs from New Jersey going to be attending the International Association of Police Chiefs convention in San Diego. That was just a few days ago. So unfortunately, we have to make a change of date. We'll let you know about that. But how many people have ever helped at a law breakfast or attended one? Wow. Okay. Now, the next thing is, at the meeting we're having on September 24th, we're going to have a speaker who's going to tell us about all the programs that we could do. I apologize for having to go back, but I don't know how to stop this. And we also are going to take time to go over all the chances we have for you to participate in activities of the men's club. Look, we all know that most of us are probably retired and looking for things to do. This is one tiny section. There's almost 50 items not only just 50 items, and we're going to go over them quickly when we do this, and the board members at each table will be able to help you if you have questions. Not only are there 50 items, over a dozen of those items are things you could do from home. Some of the research that's necessary, but we'll go into that later. This is September meeting. Now, today, we have two things, our investment club and the fantasy football draft. The investment club meets usually after the meeting. Now, let me tell you about the investment club. No, not what you're thinking. We don't have millions of dollars, but we do have hundreds of thousands. And it was started in order to take advantage of the expertise that many of our members have to give us advice on making purchases. And it's worked out nicely. We've been doing it for decades now. And if you're interested in that, at the end of the meeting, Art's Court is in charge of that. Art, would you raise your hand, please? Art's up.
I've got to wait for you to finish your...
That's correct. Art's here, and if you have a question about joining the meeting, the investment club, please ask him. Okay? Fantasy football, that's been going on for quite a few years. Don Weisenstein, Don?
He's not here tonight.
Oh, he's not here today? He's online? We're doing the draft today. So it's too late to participate, to sign up, but you can join one of the others. You can make a difference, guys. Look, you spent a lifetime making money, now you can make a difference. Okay? Volunteer. And that's your men's club. At one time, we were voted the best men's club in North America. Okay, that's it. The only thing I want to say is, I am so glad we have a couple guys here today. 94-year-old Bert Schaefer. Thank you for coming again, Bert. Jewish War Vets participant. Always would come to help do things. Even put up the sukkah last year. Dennis Satinoff. Dennis has been ill for 3 years now, roughly. Dennis, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you, Dennis. Now I'm going to turn the podium back over to our president. Dave?
Oh, you know my name.
Engelbert Humphrey.
All right, thank you. If any questions, you can ask Mike, but we'll spend a lot of time next Sunday meeting, breakfast doing that. Okay, so we're going to have our speaker now.
Before the speaker comes on, I just want to ask you guys, I'm trying to fill shoes that are about this big, whose wearer is sitting right up front here, who did these programs for since I was a little guy. And
Still a little guy.
I'll agree with that, Bob. But Dave's still intimately involved in getting speakers and so forth. So I'm not doing this alone, but I need your help. If you know someone who you think would be an interesting speaker for us, let me know. That's where a lot of our suggestions come from. We have some exciting programs coming up. I think, of course, as Mike said, we're going to do the volunteer forms and information at the next meeting, and we're going to have Oded Krause, I believe, from the JCC telling us about all the JCC programs. I think we have a really interesting speaker the following month that was also suggested by someone out here in the audience. These two guys right here, Schuster and Ehrlich. We have, I don't know, you guys all remember Will Chamberlain, I'm sure, at your age. I know at my age I do. Wilt was around here in the 60s, of course, if you remember, and then I think he left and went to the Lakers, but he was quite a prominence here during the 60s. The owner of the Sixers at that time was a guy named Ike Richman, who unfortunately, I think at age 52, had a heart attack during a Sixers-Celtics game or Sixers-Knicks game, anyway, in the middle of a game, and died, unfortunately. His son, David, is a local resident, Philly or outskirts, somewhere out there, who wrote a book called Wilt, Ike, and Me. And Wilt actually lived with Ike Richmond and his family quite a bit of the time that he was here in Philadelphia, believe it or not, out on, I think in Elkins Park or in that area, Cheltenham. They moved a couple times, but in any case, he's going to be our speaker in October, so keep that in mind if you want to hear his story. And of course, he has a book if you want to look it up or get a copy of it. It's called Wilt, Ike, and Me, David Richmond. And we have some programs after that. But today, I'm sure you guys are all familiar. You might not know him as the editor, but the editor of The Voice, which I'm sure most of you get, David Portnoe, who's going to give us his own bio.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Before I actually start, I'd like to do a couple things. First of all, I'd like to thank you all very much for inviting me and serving me a nice breakfast and having me here as your speaker. It is a great honor. And of course, there are a number of current and former Voice board members here. So if you would like to raise your hand or there you go. So thank you again. I also want to do two pieces of little voice promotion, if you will. The first thing is at your table, and if you received The Voice, you should have gotten a letter, is a way you can put a New Year's greeting in the upcoming issue of The Voice. It's going to run in our New Year's special issue on September 20th. The way the holidays fall this year, it's kind of, we have half the stuff going into next week's issue and half the stuff on September 20th, since the holidays are a little bit away from this issue and a little bit closer to that issue. So you can scan the code on the letter. There's actually a second page that allows you to send a check in to put a New Year's greeting. And the deadline is Friday, September 1st. So we have to, whatever you're doing, we have to receive it by Friday. You could go on the website and click on Rosh Hashanah greeting. The second thing that I'd like to do is in the current issue of The Voice, there's an ad, and you should also have received a letter if you are on the Voice mailing list for the Voice Friends campaign. Every year we solicit donations to The Voice. We can't function and can't keep going without the support and help of the community. So please, if you are able, make a contribution to our Friends campaign. So now, a little bit about myself, and then I'll talk to you about The Voice and Jewish journalism in general. So, I am a graduate of the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University, where I received my master's in 1985. I then went to Israel for a year, volunteered in Israel, came back. I'm from the East Coast, from Philadelphia, so I came back to the East Coast, saw an ad in the Philadelphia Inquirer for The Voice, looking for a reporter, started my career here, and I've been here for 35 years. So the last 14 of which as editor of the paper. I became the editor when my predecessor, Harriet Kessler, who some of you may remember, retired. So I've been with The Voice that amount of time. So let me tell you a little bit about Jewish journalism, and then I'll talk about The Voice, and then answer any questions that you might have. So, Jewish journalism, the oldest Jewish newspaper, as far as we know, The first one to start was the London Jewish Chronicle. The oldest one in the United States actually started in Philadelphia. It was started by Isaac Leeser, who led Mikveh Israel in Philadelphia, and he started a paper called the Occident, and that started in 1843. So that's how far Jewish journalism goes in the United States. The oldest continuously published and still publishing paper in the United States is the American Israelite, which was started in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1854. So that was kind of the genesis of Jewish newspapers in the United States. I would say if you want the heyday of Jewish newspapers was probably from about 1900, and I'm talking about just the printed paper, was probably from about 1900 to the advent of the internet age. So there was a point where there were literally hundreds of Jewish newspapers, not only in English, but in Yiddish and Russian and Hebrew and Ladino, which is a Spanish Hebrew type dialect of Sephardic Jewish communities. So at one point there were hundreds of Jewish newspapers. That number kind of declined as more people spoke English. Newspapers became more associated with individual locations. So there are still 125 members approximately of the American Jewish Press Association. So there are close to 100 Jewish newspapers in the United States. Some of those members are individual members, but there are still many printed Jewish newspapers in the United States. And obviously, in recent years, some newspapers have migrated to the internet completely and just publish a website. But there are many papers in many communities, including here in South Jersey, that do both. We have an active website. We have the printed paper. So we do both. So let me tell you a little bit about The Voice. The Jewish Community Voice was started in 1941. So we are in our 82nd year. And started by the Federation. You all know what was happening in 1941. War was raging in Europe. The Jewish world was in a tremendous amount of distress. So the Federation established a newspaper in order to inform and educate the community about what was happening, to garner support to help Jewish refugees, those who were able to make it to the United States, as well as to help in the plight of Jews in Europe. The paper has grown. We started out with 4 pages. The first issue of The Voice was 4 pages, published exclusively by volunteers. We now are a bi-weekly paper. We average about 44, 48 pages per issue. And for at least since the early 1960s, there's been a professional staff for The Voice. About approximately 8 years ago, we made an arrangement with the Jewish Federation of Atlantic and Cape May counties. So every issue of The Voice has a section called Voice at the Shore, and we publish between 6 and 8 pages of shore Jewish news. We did that because their paper, which was a privately owned paper, it was not a Federation paper, the owner, a man by the name of Shai Kramer, was retiring, and they were going to lose their paper. So we started publishing through arrangement with them a section of The Voice. We have a shore correspondent. His name is Jordan Posner, who works for us down the shore. And every issue of the paper goes to both communities. So everybody here in Burlington, Camden, and Gloucester counties gets our news and the shore news, and everyone down the shore gets the news from both communities. And I think it's been an excellent arrangement. We also have, as I mentioned, a vibrant website. We have, we're on social media, we're on Facebook, as well as printing approximately 6,000 copies of The Voice every 2 weeks. There's two ways that people can get The Voice. You can make a minimum $36 contribution to the Jewish Federation, or you can subscribe directly to The Voice for $36. We have some people that do that. So that's basically about a little bit about the history of The Voice. The Voice has two main functions according to our bylaws. We write about, inform, educate the community about what's happening in the community, in the synagogues, organizations, places like you'll see South Jersey Men's Club information in The Voice. So we inform and educate people about the community. We cover the whole community, but we also, our second function is to promote the Jewish Federation and its family of agencies. We are a federation-owned paper. Not every Jewish newspaper is owned by its local federation. Some are family-owned across the country. Some are owned by media companies that own a couple Jewish newspapers. So there are different models. But we are supported and receive funding to cover our expenses that we don't meet every year by the Jewish Federation. That's basically the history, a little bit of the history of Jewish journalism, a little bit of history about The Voice. I know as an editor, and my predecessor, we tried to make the paper as interesting as possible. We put our commentaries and opinion pieces reflect the breadth of the Jewish community. If you don't think there are disagreements in the Jewish community, I think you're a little bit mistaken. A lot of people disagree on pretty much everything in the Jewish community. And we try to reflect the breadth of opinion in the Jewish community. We are nonpartisan. We are a nonprofit organization. I've had many times when people have come up to me and said, "Oh, David, I know you're a Republican. You always support the Republicans." And the next day, someone will come up to me and say, "Oh, David, I know you're a Democrat. You support the Democrats." So if you can't tell what I am or what the paper is, that's good. Because we really want to truly represent the breadth of the religious and political scope of our community. We have a large and diverse Jewish community, and it's always my hope that everyone finds something interesting, something they like, something they want to read, something they may agree with or disagree with in the pages of The Voice. That's basically The Voice. That's basically a little bit about Jewish journalism. And I'd really like to throw it open to questions. If people have any questions about The Voice, anything I can answer, I'd be happy to do it.
I don't think that The Voice ventured into politics at all, and that's fine. But I think to increase the Jewish influence politically, if they would show both sides, in other words, if they would occasionally have a column where both the Democrats and Republicans and maybe independents were in there, it would be neutral, but it wouldn't be non-political. So what do you think about that?
I think that's a very good idea. What we have done in the past is we've covered some candidates' debates that, for example, the JCRC has put on. We also, in the previous election, the previous New Jersey election, we invited people running for assemblyman and senator and some other offices. We sent them a list of questions and invited them to respond. So we do try to do that. The problem we sometimes run into is, okay, what happens when one side responds and the other side doesn't? So you could always say, well, they were invited to respond and they didn't, but that really doesn't look too good if you have, like, you know, the Democrat responds but the Republican does not, or the Republican responds and the Democrat does not. We try to report the news, the political news, in as straight newsy as fashion as possible. We really want to keep everyone knowing that, you know, The Voice, and by extension the Jewish Federation that owns the paper, is doing what it can to, in a sense, be in the middle of the road and make sure that everyone's opinion is appreciated and reflected, not only in the United States, but also with Israeli politics and other things that may be going on.
That's the issue I wanted to bring up. I usually turn, I think it's to page 5 for international news. It's the first thing I read in The Voice. This last issue, there was a major article on the front page, but that page 5 didn't appear with international news. And there's so much going on in Israel.
So sometimes what we do is we'll devote page 5 to Middle Eastern news. Sometimes it gets kind of scattered in the paper. We did have the front page article, which actually jumped, I believe, to page 5, on how the turmoil in Israel is reflecting U.S.-Israeli relations and the security cooperation. It really depends on each issue. What it looks like depends on how large it is, and what other news, local news or international news we have to fit or to put into it. The issues of the paper, in order to try to keep our balance sheet kind of functional, really depends on how much advertising we get for each issue. So like upcoming issues, that'll be, you know, we get some Rosh Hashanah advertising and food advertising for the upcoming holidays will be larger. So you'll see more national and international stories than, let's say, a smaller issue. You know, we have to fit the local stuff in. So that may only have 1 or 2 national or international stories.
You mentioned about the budget before, and you said you were supported by the Federation. Years ago, the newspaper used to have tons of ads. It used to be, I'm sure, self-supporting back then, in those days when you had tons of ads. What happened to that business?
A lot of businesses, well, we did. When I arrived at the paper, and for probably about 20 years afterwards, we used to run a surplus, which we turned over to the Federation. There were a lot of community businesses opening up, stores, boutiques. Now, more of those businesses devote advertising dollars to other means, whether it's, you know, through the internet, in other venues. We don't bring in the advertising dollars that we used to. I would say now we probably get about 2/3 of what we got 15 years ago. Starting in the recession of 2008, we started to move from a surplus to more of a break even or a minor loss. And then Federation stepped in and covered that deficit. And those losses have grown over the course of the past 10, 15 years. There is some advertising on our website, but not enough to still cover our deficit. So Federation has, kicks in and, keeps the paper running. And those funds come from your annual contributions to Federation.
So maybe they should try to concentrate on building that back up again like it was 15 years ago.
We're working on it, believe me. We try to get as many ads as possible. So,
who sets the editorial policy for the Voice? Who writes the editorials?
I and my assistant editor, Ezra Solway, who's the assistant editor of The Voice, we write the editorials. The editorial policy, if you're talking about just the piece that's labeled the editorial on page 6, which is unsigned, that's basically, we pick a topic, we write an editorial, I send it to generally Jen Weiss, the executive director of the Federation. 99.9% of the time, she says, that's fine, that's good. Once or twice, she may have a, why don't we change this or something like that. It's kind of like the Federation, it's the Federation's editorial and the Federation's editorial policy, but having been here so long, I kind of know what it is. And as I said, we try to be, there's some things we all agree on. We're all opposed to anti-Semitism. We're all supporting Israel, whether we agree or disagree with individual policies or not. But I kind of know what the editorials are and should be. It's only when we run into something that could be construed as controversial that it kind of needs a little more tweaking, a little more work. But it's basically the Federation and myself who are, producing the editorials and, and as I said, Ezra Solway, my assistant editor, writes a lot of them. So, Rabbi.
So, a couple things. First, as a member of the board for a number of years, the board is really not an editorial board, it's an advice. It sort of helps the business. And it's really a good thing to be. So, if we're looking for a board to be on, the Voice Board is a really good one. And also the meetings are concise, unlike any other Federation board meeting. So, when I get involved with any Federation agency, the Voice is the best. Dave, the question I wanted to ask you really is, looking towards the future, the near future, what do you think are the greatest challenges facing Jewish journalism in general, and particularly The Voice here in particular, in our community? What are the rough waters ahead of us?
I think the greatest challenges, well, first of all, from a financial standpoint, as I've said, we're facing more competition from online entities, from businesses who, want to spread their dollars elsewhere. So there's a financial challenge that The Voice is facing. Many of our younger readers don't read the physical paper. They'll go to the website. They'll, see something on Facebook that The Voice puts out. So there's a challenge of readership. There's also a challenge of, I think people today are less inclined to want to read things they disagree with. So there's kind of like, an echo chamber or silos. So for example, in the general world, you have CNN viewers and Fox News viewers, and there's more. It used to be years ago that if someone disagreed with something they read in the newspaper, they would call me up, they would send a letter to the editor, they would, they would agree with it, disagree with it, say that's interesting, that's not interesting, whatever. Nowadays, if someone disagrees with something, they tend to, rant on Facebook or something like that, and there's not really an opportunity to respond to it, and a lot of people, aren't really willing to consider, alternative viewpoints. I think that's part of an issue that we're facing.
Do you feel that if an issue came up that you really felt strongly enough, whether it was politics or religion in the Jewish community, that you felt strong and you had to comment on, and you went to the Jewish Federation and they said, hold off, do you feel as if your independence is challenged? Do you really have total independence about what you write, or does it always have to be approved by the Federation?
I have a degree of independence. I don't have, the paper doesn't have total independence. We are an agency of the Federation, and there's a lot of ways to get different viewpoints in, whether it's, someone outside the community who writes a commentary on something that we print. But people view The Voice, partly rightly so, as speaking for the Federation. And because of that circumstance, I can't really say, all right, I'm going to write this and it's going to just, half the people in the community are going to hate it, and I don't care what happens. There are issues that I feel strongly about personally that I may say we should be doing more of this that just won't fly. And there's ways, as I said, to get those viewpoints in the paper in terms of signed pieces. So for example, if a professor at a college wants to write something related to the Jewish community, and it's offered to us or circulates through Jewish Telegraphic Agency, which is our wire service, I can certainly print it. But I can't really go out on a limb and say, I think this, no matter whether the Federation agrees with it or not, because it's not my paper. I may be the editor, but it's the community's newspaper, and it's owned by the Federation. And that's just the reality of the way things are. We're not in a position to just write whatever we want to write, and it doesn't matter who thinks what.
Yeah, with the decline in synagogue membership, maybe it's a good idea to write an article about a specific synagogue every 2 weeks, and also other activities in Judaism in this area that are not doing real good. And it could also put a plug in for The Voice.
Yeah, we try our best to cover it. We try our best to cover the synagogues.
Take one particular synagogue every 2 weeks and write an article about them, what they have offering and everything. And then you can also put there, and they're also part of the JCC community and things like that. Maybe people will respond.
So if you look in this current issue of The Voice, we literally have a 3.5-page guide to all the synagogues in the community, as well as the ones down the shore, a separate shore synagogue guide. that the synagogues provide to us. We do that yearly before the holidays, what their programs are, what they offer. We try to do that as best we can. And we do also, spend some time and allocate some resources to covering some of the programs and good things about what's happening with the synagogue. I see what you're saying, and I think it's a very good idea. But we do our best to also cover the synagogues. We are a community newspaper, I think that's very important. The Jewish Community Voice, even though it's owned by the Federation, really belongs to the Southern New Jersey Jewish community. It's part and parcel of this community.
Yeah, do you have like multiple desks, like the local news, the synagogue news, the between, the editor for the local sports, the editor for the regional
So it
sports?
changes your whole-
It's a big event, isn't it? You have lots of these different departments with
Right,
each section.
right. Both of us who work for the paper. We have two full-time editorial staff people, Ezra and myself, and we also have freelance writers.
How many salespeople?
We have one salesperson. We've been looking for a while for a second ad salesperson. But, people like, we have...
You don't have a different beat reporter for each school?
No.
Entertainment?
We have people at those organizations that send us something. We have freelance writers. Gary, who is sitting over there, writes for us and is a voice board member. And we have some other people who do articles for us. But no, we don't have like Bethel desk and the Temple Beth Shalom desk. And and that might be nice, but that's not something we have at the moment. But we try to get in what we can, and we do have contacts at each of the synagogues. So.
At your time with the paper, have you ever had, or has the paper ever had, the ability to scoop everybody else in terms of something that's happening?
We have. A lot of the local Jewish community news. We get in first. In terms of something, like some blockbuster thing that there are times we've had that news earlier than others. Part of the issue is, and now it's a little different because we can put things up on our website, at a moment's notice. But being a bi-weekly, in terms of the physical paper, and we only coming out every 2 weeks, sometimes there's things that get in the Inquirer or the Courier, or that just, our next issue might be a week later. But there are times when we've gotten local things in the paper, announcements, things like that, stories that because it has worked out that we found out about them first. So.
My understanding is that local general circulation newspapers are disappearing in communities all over this country, and even some of the major newspapers are cutting back on their coverage of local interest stuff. Have you considered whether or not there should be an expansion in the Voice to cover more general interest things as opposed to just Jewish things? And as your relationship with the Federation give you added strength or added problems, or is it some of each?
I don't know that we have the resources to cover the general, some of the things that aren't being covered by other papers. Yes, that's true. A lot of local newspapers have folded, and a lot of the larger general newspapers have cut back. There's a dearth a dearth of people, who are able to, that a newspaper can send out there to cover a school board meeting or a town council meeting. You don't see a lot of that stuff anymore in a lot of communities. When I was at Northwestern, you take various journalism classes. I would go out to a suburb of Chicago and cover, the city council meetings and the school board meetings and things like that. And that's how I learned. And you used to have a lot of people do that. Now,
Nobody does it.
now very few do. Very few do.
Could you explain your fact check protocol?
We write articles and we do our best to check the facts. That's our fact check protocol. We try to make sure that all the information is correct, all the names are spelled correctly, all the phone numbers are correct. Occasionally, does something slip in there? Yes, but we do our best, to make sure that all the facts are checked. Because there's nothing more important for a newspaper. Because if you read something and someone's name is spelled incorrectly or someone's title is wrong, that leads you to question everything that's in the paper. What can you trust? But that's really our we do our best with the resources that we have.
David, what about any impact on the part of AI, artificial intelligence, that if you see that corrupting one of the voice at all, or any intent to use it in the future?
I haven't really seen it crop into the voice. I mean, I don't personally have an intent to use it. It is, there's an article, it was actually in this last issue by Steve Lubetkin, who's our computer, internet kind of reporter. He writes a column every other issue called CompuSchmooze. And he talks about circumstance where AI generated a story about the valedictorian at a school who spoke, and then the local town council kind of came down on the school and her because of what she said. And they weren't there. They basically used the recorded meetings of the school, and it was like an AI-generated story, but really didn't reflect the reality of what was going on. Over the years, we've come across a lot of technology-based things that we've had to decide to what to do with it. So years ago, for example, we received a photo of people at an event from a local organization. And I honestly don't remember what organization or synagogue it was from. But it was a trip, and you could tell that some of the people were not actually in the picture that they sent us, because the background was different. They looked like they were slightly, off to the edge. And I called, the organization. I said, this doesn't look correct. And they said, well, they didn't get in the picture, so we put their picture in the picture. And I said, you can't do that. We're not printing it, because that's not reality. If they weren't in the picture, you could say not pictured were. You can't take their picture separately and pretend as if they were in the picture. So technology has a lot of interesting ramifications on what we're doing.
David.
Barney?
Yeah, talking about successes and failures, The Voice being a success, I never quite understood what happened to the Exponent out of Philadelphia, which used to publish 100 pages every week and has kind of almost disappeared from the face of the earth. So what happened to that? It was a very significant Jewish paper, and you succeeded and they didn't. What happened?
Well, in terms of the Exponent in Philadelphia, they basically, when we were having a small surplus or breaking even, they were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even though they were a very sizable paper, for the number of papers they were printing and their expenses and the size of their staff, they were losing a lot of money. And they also had an issue where, as you may have read, there was one of their employees embezzled some money. They basically were put in the position where they had to sell the paper to a media company, which is now publishing it. So they did that. But it was really a matter of they could never really meet their expenses. And for years they had lost a lot of money. And at one point, I guess the Federation decided not to absorb that that loss anymore. I'm sorry.
I remember growing up and my parents would read the Forward newspaper. And I don't know if it was local or national, whatever, but they would read it to us over dinner or whatever. And the paper actually gave opinions on every political topic we can imagine. And I thought it was fascinating. And I found it more fascinating than the Bulletin and the Enquirer. And I want to get your opinion. Now, I think the Forward's going. I don't know if it's going or not.
No, it's not. It's not going.
I get it. Really?
It's online.
It's online, but it's not going.
Hebrew or
Yiddish.
And
it's in English.
Yeah.
And the fascinating part was when my parents would read it to me, I said, my God, they're actually giving opinions and things to do about every topic you can imagine. Is that still happening? I'm not sure.
So the Forward started out as a Yiddish newspaper. It was a national Yiddish newspaper. As time went on, it kind of split and it was half Yiddish and half English, and eventually became all English as Yiddish readers kind of went away. It was always an independent paper. It was never owned by a federation or organization. The Forward has one of the reasons it was very opinionated and published a lot of opinions was because it was established by socialists who came from Europe, to the United States.
Was it considered a communist paper?
It was not a communist paper. It was more of a socialist, if you know, Bundist newspaper, published out of New York. Then it became a magazine. It published a monthly magazine, and then went all online, and is still published online. Interestingly enough, one of the things that I hear sometimes from people who I know used to get like the Forward and other publications that are now online is the time they would read it, and I'm talking about people with a particular religious bent, the time they would read it would be like Shabbat afternoon after synagogue, and which they can't read online now because they're not going, you're not going online on Shabbat if you observe, in that way. So they kind of miss the actual physical papers. So,
Do you have an opinion on what's going on in Israel right now?
yes, I do.
You want to share it with us?
No, I don't. No, I don't want to share it. Yes, I have an opinion. No, I don't want to share it. It's not, in my official capacity, it's not really
So
appropriate.
you got to read the Forward to get the opinion of what's going on in Israel.
Or that opinion, yeah.
My grandmother used to say, it's got to be true because it's in the Forwards.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
That's right.
Has the Voice ever taken a position on what happened to that newspaper in Kansas?
No. That just recently happened.
Yeah.
I think it's...
Excuse me, could you repeat the question?
So the question was, has the Voice ever taken an opinion on what happened to the newspaper in Kansas? So what happened to the newspaper in Kansas is this small community newspaper in a town of about 1,200 people, actually, I don't think they published it. They had information about a local restaurant owner who was convicted of DUI and was driving around without a license. And apparently that local restaurant owner convinced the police to raid the offices of the newspaper. They seized computers. The owner of the paper, who was 98 years old, died. She had a heart attack, and she and her son was actually is running the newspaper, and had been, and it was really a case of, official abuse, and national news organizations have come down really hard on it, and the whole situation is being investigated. They had information, they didn't run with it, but I guess some people, who had sway in this town really just wanted to shut the newspaper down. And it's become a kind of big bubbling story in newspaper circles and news circles and general circles. But it's actually, it's egregious in the worst way.
Yeah, the paper was also doing an investigation of the sheriff.
Right.
Conducted the raid.
Yeah.
So that was probably the motivation more so than
Ever since I was a kid, when I learned that Sandy Koufax was a Jewish ball player, I think he sat out one World Series game for Rosh Hashanah. I've been following Jewish sports figures. There's not a lot of them left, but I've been following Jewish sports figures. And while the Jewish Sports is a wonderful newspaper, it has certain more interesting articles than others. I personally feel that if they would devote 1 or 2 paragraphs to national Jewish sports players, because I learned accidentally once in a while that some Phillies player was Jewish or somebody else is Jewish. I follow that myself. If you would devote 1 or 2 paragraphs to just Jews in sports, I think it would be a little exciting, especially for men to read.
Yeah, we do that. There are articles in the paper on Jews in sports. There are actually, I believe, this year 18 or 19 Jewish Major League Baseball players. So it's actually, freed the pitcher in Atlanta. There's a whole bunch of Jewish sports people now in the United States.
Center fielder in the Yankees. What about, here we have a big group of seniors, and we frequently have speakers that come here and on anti-Semitism and some topics that may affect our community in general. Recognizing you have a limited editorial staff, do you ever request submissions to the paper about some of the areas that we're involved with? Because we have a lot of things going on here that would be of interest, I think, to the community in general.
I know that Gary and others, Mike Perloff and Gary, have sent me pictures, send me things about what happens with the South Jersey Men's Club. So we do have the South Jersey Men's Club represented in The Voice. And we run photos, like, for example, when you flag the graves, and I think I've been to a dozen law enforcement breakfasts over the years, covering it for the paper. Sometimes we run photographs, sometimes I actually cover the speaker, both now and when it was co-sponsored with the JCRC. So, all right, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to have 50-50. And our guest is going to pick it.
Oh, this is pressure.
$46.
All right, so what do I do here?
Just pick one.
Pick a ticket? Yeah. All right, so I'm rooting around. I am picking a ticket.
Oh, okay. Last three digits. 102. 102. 102. All right. Okay, we want to thank David. Thank David for being here. We usually give a 1-year free membership to a speaker. Well, you're around anyway, so picture.
Okay, so also, I just want to mention, which occurred to me at the moment, this is not the first time I've actually spoken to the South Jersey Men's Club. I spoke to the South Jersey Men's Club, it's got to be a long while ago. I think you were meeting...
It was here.
It was here?
Yeah.
He remembers, he was one.
I thought it was...
He was the one who got you here, and he doesn't remember.
But, for some reason I thought it was off-site somewhere.
Yeah, it was here.
All right.
That's why we have a board. One person remembers all the time.
Well, thank you again. Thank you.
Picture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was an honor, and I hope at some point in the future you have me back. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, just a couple quick things. If a number of you guys are missing nameplates, just see Ron about it. Ron Edinger about it. Also, next time, please bring books and food. So we are collecting that. Thank you for the ones who donations today.